given that it was a result of an assassination from the air by Israel and by the United States.
So Piers Morgan just got schooled by Yanis Varoufakis on Middle East geopolitics, and it's absolutely devastating. Varoufakis isn't just some academic. He's the former Greek finance minister who took on the EU during their debt crisis. Now he's dismantling Western foreign policy myths with surgical precision.
Let me put it this way. Take it from the perspective of people in Iran who were opposing the Ayatollah, who were opposing the regime, who were protesting for years, since, remember, 2018, even before that, the brutality that was practiced, especially against women.
This point about Iranian protesters is crucial. The 2019 protests saw over 1,500 killed by regime forces, and the 2022 Masa Amini uprising brought millions to the streets. These weren't CIA operations. They were genuine grassroots movements demanding freedom. Foreign assassinations completely undermine their legitimacy.
What happened was essentially the regime was given a major boost, a major morale boost. It became far more legitimate. Because, Piers, you and I have different backgrounds in the sense that I grew up in a very right-wing dictatorship. My father was abducted in the middle of the night by the secret police.
Varoufakis lived under Greece's military junta from 1967 to 1974, a brutal CIA-backed dictatorship that tortured thousands. His father's abduction wasn't hyperbole, it was reality. This personal experience gives him credibility that most Western commentators simply don't have when analyzing authoritarian regimes.
My mother's brother was court-martialed. People I know were tortured. Back then, we hated the regime in Athens in the 1960s and 70s. But I tell you that if any foreign power, the Soviet Union, Britain, whoever, if they bombed us and killed the person we loathed, who happened to be ruling the land at the time.
This is the classic rally around the flag effect political scientists have documented for decades. Foreign attacks always strengthen domestic governments, even unpopular ones. We saw it after 9/11 with Bush, after Pearl Harbor with FDR. External threats create internal unity, even under dictatorships.
We would have felt just awfully conflicted, firstly, because we would be upset that the government, which we opposed, was given the legitimacy that goes hand in hand with any government that is being taken out by a foreign leader unlawfully.
Exactly right. Iranian dissidents are now stuck defending a regime they despise because the alternative is foreign occupation. It's the same trap Iraqi Democrats faced after 2003. Suddenly, Saddam's opponents look like collaborators. These assassinations don't liberate anyone. They delegitimize genuine opposition movements.
The choice is either this government, this regime, a system that actually works. Not very well, but it works. It's not Libya. It's not Syria. It's not a failed state.
Libya went from Africa's highest living standards under Gaddafi to a failed state with open slave markets after NATO's 2011 intervention. Syria's civil war killed 500,000 people. Iran's government may be authoritarian, but it provides basic services and stability that regime change consistently destroys.
An illegal war that is brought by a foreign power, which, by the way, has absolutely no moral authority to talk about democracy in Iran, because it was in 1953 that the CIA and the United States overthrew the only functioning liberal democracy that Iran ever knew.
Operation Ajax in 1953 is the smoking gun here. The CIA and MI6 overthrew Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh because he nationalized oil. They installed the Shah's dictatorship for 25 years. America literally destroyed Iranian democracy, then lectures them about freedom.
On the one hand, you have Israel that has violated every nuclear proliferation or anti-proliferation treaty there is. Nobody's talking about the nuclear weapons that Israel has.
Israel has an estimated 90 nuclear warheads, refuses international inspections, and never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Meanwhile, Iran's nuclear program is monitored by cameras and inspectors. The double standard is glaring. Nuclear states demanding non-nuclear states remain defenseless while they arm to the teeth.
Ironically, isn't it terribly ironic that if you think about it, the best that Donald Trump can get now is something like that agreement that Obama had already struck with the Iranians and the Europeans, and the Germans were really very, very gung-ho about it, including Angela Merkel, the chancellor at the time. and which then Donald Trump, the moment he was elected, not because he had any strong opinions about this, he just wanted to bring down anything that Obama had done, and it was a direct request by Israel.
The JCPOA was actually working. Iran reduced its uranium stockpile by 98% and allowed unprecedented inspections. Trump killed it purely out of spite for Obama, not strategy. Now Biden's stuck trying to rebuild what Trump destroyed, while Iran has advanced their program years beyond where it was.
Iran is the only country that has not invaded any of its neighbors. It was invaded brutally by Iraq. That invasion saw 600,000 people die in Iran. Chemical weapons were used with the acknowledgement of support or, turning a blind eye of the West.
During the Iran-Iraq War, Reagan's administration provided Iraq with chemical weapons intelligence while Saddam gassed Iranian cities. Donald Rumsfeld literally shook hands with Saddam in 1983. The West armed Iraq's chemical attacks, then spent decades condemning Iran for defending itself.
Well, because you see, I have a problem with terrorism because, the IRA used to be terrorist until we had the Good Friday Agreement. And then they became partners in peace. Nelson Mandela was admonished as a terrorist when I lived in England. Margaret Thatcher, I remember calling him a terrorist. And then he became one of the greatest statesmen in the world. So I have a problem with the word terror because you see the whole point about the hideousness of human endeavors when it comes to defeating one another is to terrorize one another.
Brilliant point about terrorist designations. The U.S. literally armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, including Osama bin Laden, when they fought the Soviets. One man's terrorist is another's freedom fighter, depending entirely on geopolitical convenience. These labels are weapons, not moral judgments.
Anybody who tells me that the right solution to that is for the United States and Israel to win is essentially telling me that they have no concern at all about international law and they would like to see the violators of international law be the victors.
This cuts to the heart of the international order. If we normalize illegal wars and assassinations because we dislike certain governments, we're essentially endorsing might makes right. The UN Charter exists for a reason. Without it, we're back to pure imperial competition.
But the only explanation I can have, because I'm equally puzzled, is that, Netanyahu has a single-minded commitment to never-ending war, to permanent war, because it's his way of staying in power, and it's his way of continuing the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. That's the only thing he cares. So while you and I and everybody else were talking about Iran or Greenland or South Lebanon, he can continue his dirty deed in East Jerusalem, in West Bank, and stay in power, keep clinging on power in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Netanyahu faces corruption charges and depends on far-right coalition partners to stay in power. Permanent war serves his political survival perfectly. Israelis don't change leaders during security crises. Meanwhile, West Bank settlements expand daily while the world focuses on Iran and Gaza.
If you join us in bombing Tehran and we get rid of the leadership of Iran in the same way that Israel got rid of the leadership of Hezbollah or of Hamas, then, there will be a revolution, a popular revolution, and you just need to sit back in your armchair in the White House and watch the Iranian government collapse.
The regime change fantasy has failed every single time. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, all disasters. Iran has 80 million people and a functioning state apparatus. The idea that bombing Tehran creates democracy is pure magical thinking, the same delusion that produced 20 years of failure.
But it is a very sad state of affairs that the rest of the world depends on these little games played between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu.
This really captures the tragedy of modern geopolitics. Global stability shouldn't depend on whether Trump and Netanyahu get along or have a falling out. Millions of lives hang in the balance of these personal relationships between leaders with enormous egos and questionable judgment.